Welcome to the last of the Call High Wildcats 1982 podcast, brought to you by Dietzel Man Productions.
My high school self,
and you go to college and you're on this all-star team, and so I would tell myself that really don't listen to that voice inside your head that tells you you're not good enough. And probably the other thing I would tell myself is get more sleep.
Not everyone's gonna like you, but try to make them want you. Still working on that one.
People say, oh, I'm not going to have kids yet because it's not the right time. Or I'm not going to get married yet because it's not the right time. Well, if you keep moving the goalposts in life, it's never going to be the right time. So enjoy your life.
Do what you love for a living. Figure out a way to make that work. Don't do something because it's what you're supposed to do or because it's going to be the most fun. You do something that makes you happy.
Take going to Landers for lunch. Sitting around Jeff Blair's Mustang 2 and listening to his tape of Fleetwood Walk.
One of my favorite lines in a movie is from Cool Runnings. And there's a young man who wants to get a gold medal. And he had a coach that cheated to win. And this young man asked why he cheated, to win. And in the course of that conversation, he said he wanted to get the gold, he had to get the gold medal. But he came to the realization that if you're not enough without the gold medal, you're never going to be enough with the gold medal. And I think I love that.
Hey, this is Scott Townsend. Welcome back to the last of the Call High Wildcats 1982 podcast. And today I've got with me Kurt Rovenstein. Kurt, what's going on, man?
Scott, it's not a lot. It's good to be with you. And thanks for doing this. This has been a lot of fun to watch parts and pieces as time allows. So,
yeah, well, great. I'm glad to have you on today. And so what'd you have for breakfast this morning?
Breakfast. I had, we do an open house every year, and we had lots of Christmas cookies, probably too many. So we had leftovers. So for the next 3 or 4 days, I'm going to have Christmas sugar cookies for breakfast. But then my wife makes me a smoothie with, all the healthy stuff for the middle of the day. So that helps kind of balance that out.
Yeah.
I can't do that all the time, but it's Christmas, right?
Oh, yeah. Between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
No rules.
No rules. Just hands off.
Right.
So what's it like? Well, how old are you now? 57, 58?
I'm 58. Yeah.
So, getting old's not for sissies.
It's crazy. I mean, do you still feel like you're in high school sometimes? I mean, you just think, oh, I can do that. Or just feel young and you're not the old person yet.
Right. Mentally, I still see myself probably around 25, 26, something like that, But then I look in the mirror and like, oh my God.
26 doesn't look good on me.
And I got these bags under my eyes,
Yeah.
And I heard that if you put preparation H on them, it'll shrink up the bags.
Really? Not going to try that. I'm okay with bags under my eyes. If
that's the remedy.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Yeah. The things we do.
Yeah, exactly.
Try to look younger. So what have you been up to the last 39 years? Where are you? Where are you coming?
So we're currently living in a town by the name of Johnson, Southwest Kansas. We're about 15 minutes from Colorado border and about 40 miles from the Oklahoma border. Farming country, milk country, a lot of dairies out here. Good weather for that. But I'm pastoring a church here in the little town. The town is about 1,000 people, about 2,000 in the county, flat as can be. And as I think I told you this before, but it's a place where if your dog runs away, you can watch him for 3 days. So it's that flat. Yeah. So, well, it's a nice community. We love the people, and the weather here is perfect except for the wind, and it's out where the wind blows all the time. So, but we like it. Glad to been here about 9 years.
So how big is the church? How many people?
Pre-COVID or post-COVID?
Yeah, really.
I mean, it's nuts. So,
let's go post-COVID, because all bets are off after.
We're running in the 80s, give or take. On a good Sunday, we'll hit 100. But around 80 probably is kind of where we're settling back, and that may be the new normal. I don't know. That's
do you guys use TV? Do you guys do live streaming or anything like that?
We don't live stream. I record service and then upload it. We'd go to Facebook and YouTube. I just have more control that way. When I'm always hearing, well, sorry about the live stream going down mid-service last week. Something happened with our internet or camera.
Right.
So if I can upload it and have it there, if something goes wrong, it's on their end and not mine. So I just do the sermon and announcements. Maybe our worship leader occasionally will put a song on or something. But trying to find that place where not giving them too much, so that if they want the full experience, it's here, but not making light of people's continued caution in the midst of COVID that still is still a thing.
Right. Family.
2 girls. One lives in Washington State, in Bellevue, and the other one is in Bartlesville. The Bartlesville daughter has a couple of grandkids that we love to come down and visit as often as we can. One is 2.5. The other one will be 1 at the end of January. So growing like crazy.
You're brand new at the grandfather thing, huh?
Yeah, giving it a shot. I think we'll keep them. So I remember that first day going in the hospital, and you pick up this kid that your daughter had, and you think there's no way. And if we're still thinking we're 26, how is my daughter old enough to have her own? But you just go, this child's perfect, and everybody kind of, I'm sure, believes that. But it's something you don't understand until it happens to you.
Right. They wouldn't let us go to the hospital.
Yeah.
So for 3 days afterwards, the rumor had it that there was another Townsend in Bartlesville, but we couldn't go see. And so
not verify or deny. Right. Yeah.
It was weird.
Yeah. Well, in my profession, that has been one of the great frustrations of this whole thing. I mean, I've counseled families as they've watched loved ones, pass that they couldn't go and see. And I actually just lost a cousin, and his parents were in the hospital, and I think they were able to make some connection. But it's just unfortunate, and right or wrong, it's tough.
Right.
To do that. And same thing with grandkids, or somebody that's just in for a normal procedure, to be able to go in and encourage them, pray with them, talk with them, help them, through that is not available. So
yeah, crazy. So so bring us up to speed. I don't think you and I've talked in the last 30
well
years.
I think I've occasionally, when we run through Bartlesville, I think I ran into you outside of Walmart once.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually used to work at United, right?
Right.
I was driving by United once, and I saw you getting out of your car, and
oh, okay.
I had no clue who I was, so let that one go. But we left Bartlesville. I married a girl that I met at what was Bartlesville Wesleyan College at that time. She from Wyoming, and we went to California for a year. We lived in Wyoming, worked with her father for 4 or 5 years in the greenhouse business, and then got back into ministry, which has been where I've my career has been for the most part. Then lived in Lawrence, Kansas for 5 years. Junction
That's cool.
for several years, and then short stint in Bartlesville before we came out here. But yeah, kind of been around the world. Not as bad as it used to be for pastors. I mean, it used to be every 4 years you'd be ready to go. You go to camp and conference with your trailer packed, wondering where they're going to, if it was your turn, you just said, we're going somewhere else. We don't know where it is. But that's changed a little bit. The last 10 years, I've been a part of an organization that my dad started called Bibles for China. And I'm taking over the role of president in that organization. So my dad is kind of stepping away from that. And we distribute Bibles in the rural parts of China through the registered church to those who live on a couple $100 to $500 a year, couldn't afford them if we weren't providing that for them. At the beginning of that, it was really cool to be able to. Now we can't go in anymore. China's changed a lot of policies, but at the very beginning of this, to be able to give people Bibles that didn't have one since the Cultural Revolution, that we've seen some of the printed Bibles where they just would share a Bible and they'd write a page and then share it and write a page. We saw some of those. So it's been really rewarding to be able to do that. So, but other than that, yeah, just living life and enjoying grandkids.
Living the dream.
Living the dream. Absolutely. Yeah.
So how did you get out to is it Johnson City, you say?
Johnson City, yeah. Not
How
Johnson
Oh,
County.
yeah. Johnson City.
Just denominationally, a church came open, the district superintendent said, hey, we've got a church out here, think you'd fit. And that's how that happens.
Yeah.
We're part of the Wesleyan denomination, so the higher ups often give a lot of direction in that regard. So, yeah.
Shifting gears just a second, what was life like for you growing up in Bartlesville? Seems like I remember you playing the trumpet. Was that a trumpet?
It was the trumpet.
And you had a brother, Mickey?
Yeah, Mick was a little younger. My older brother, Nate, was a couple years older than me. Alan was the oldest. He was the real trumpet player. I stopped having interest in the trumpet when in junior high we had challenges. You played, right?
Yeah.
You may have been a part of this story. Okay, this changed my life forever. I don't remember the teacher's name, but
Tansy?
I think that was it. Yeah.
Kermit Tansy?
Could have been. We had, so you could have challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could challenge 3 chairs up. That was as far as you go. Ninth chair couldn't challenge first chair.
Right.
So I was sitting at 3rd chair and I challenged chair number 1. And the story was you could never drop more than 3 because only 3 could challenge, you could only challenge up 3. So somebody challenged for my spot 3 places back. Well, I didn't worry about that one because I knew I couldn't go any further than 6. I was concentrating on first chair. Well, I lost both. So I moved back, after I lost my challenge to first chair, to chair number 6. And there was somebody sitting there and they looked at me like, this is my chair. I go back to 9. Somebody was sitting there and said, this is my chair. I go back to 12 and that chair was empty. So everybody had challenged up 3. That place was filled. And I go back to 12 and I look up at the director and I kind of shrug my shoulders like, wait, I thought you could only go down 3. And he just does. I said, okay, I'm done. I didn't like it that much anyway. I mean, it was like this catastrophic drop.
Wow.
Place.
Wow.
So we started having fun back there, and 11, 12, and 13, just enjoying band. But yeah,
Did you grow up in Bartlesville?
we moved there when we were in 7th grade.
Hmm.
When I was moving into 7th grade that summer. So Salina, Kansas is where
Hmm.
we lived. Dad came to work at the Bartlesville Wesleyan College, what's
Oh,
what's
okay.
now Oak Grove. So yeah, I liked Bartlesville. Bartlesville was a good place to live, good friends. Most of the folks I hung out with were church friends. So John Snook and Russ Gonzalez, who was from Sooner, Brent McIntosh, all the Mueller clan. It was Mueller Construction and
Mhm.
Realty. Those folks
Mhm.
were the people I hung out with. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was a good place to live. So
What are some of your favorite memories of College High?
I don't know, I thought about that. I think the things I remember most are centered around the football games, Friday night football games. I don't know why. I mean, I just kind of went to go to school because that's what you had to do. I probably didn't connect as much as I should have. In fact, I know I didn't, but I love the football games. I've got lots of memories of, specific plays and specific games where,
Oh yeah.
guys would, kickoff returns for touchdowns. And I remember Matt Newman one time on a kickoff. I think he was probably a junior at that time, but he was playing kickoff coverage and he went down and he just leveled the guy. I mean, the guy wasn't looking. Just watching how excited he was coming off the field, just, doing that, slapping people on the head. Man, that was fun. Of course, I was, 140 and as skinnier than I am now. I
Yeah.
would do that, but that looked fun. Yeah, football was, and I don't know about you, but I'm not sure I remember one basketball game when I went to school. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't either. We were talking about basketball with Donnie. Donnie was on, but I don't remember that much about basketball at all. I remember Bruno. I've told this story before. I was like, I was super tall when I was in high school. And, so Bruno wants to see me after school, and he has a basketball, and he says, "So here, let me see what you can do with this." So I'm dribbling around there, stumbling around. And pretty soon, after about 5 minutes, goes, "Here, just give me the ball back. We'll just."
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, I'll see you later.
Yeah, I played one year, or I was on the team one year, and it's a similar kind of response. He said, you're never going to play, but if you want to be a practice dummy, basically is what he said.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, I'll be that for a year, but I didn't play after that. And I don't know if at that point if I lost interest, but I do remember, what year was it that Call High and Sooner had that like 6 overtime game? That was crazy. It was down in the old gymnasium at Phillips.
Oh yeah, no, I don't remember.
I don't think
that.
I may not even have been in high school yet. It was older guys, but they had that was. I think that was a record for a while, just like 6 or 7 overtimes. But that's maybe the only basketball game I remember.
I'll have to post that in the comments under the video on Facebook. See if anybody knows who that was.
Yeah,
I'm sure somebody out there does. What song takes you back to College High?
Anything Boston.
Yeah.
I loved Boston when I was in high school. About the only, and then there's some pop, music that was on the radio that every once in a while I remember, but Boston was.
Oh yeah.
Was my music, and then Commodores, I think probably too.
Oh yeah.
Little Commodores.
So I was looking through the yearbook, and there was a picture of you. You're taking a college course in high school.
Right.
What was that all about?
So in I think that was my senior year, obviously. I thought I wanted to maybe go into business of some sort. At that point, I knew I was probably going to be a preacher, but it was one of those, God tells you what you're going to do, and you tell him what you're going to do, and he lets you do it for a while until you get that straightened out. So I was just taking some, I think it was accounting 1 and 2. I took, first semester and second semester. So it was enjoyable. So fun to be out there. Of course, my dad worked on campus, so I was out there all the time. So it wasn't like it was any new experience, but it was
Right.
fun to see what college was like. Yeah.
Well, you ready to take a break? I think we need to take a break.
Sure.
You want to take a break?
We can take a break.
All right. So we'll be back with Kurt Rovenstein right after this.
Thank you for listening to the last of the Call High Wildcats 1982 podcast.
Pop's Daylight Donuts, man, they've got the best tasting donuts, sausage wraps, pastries in Northeast Oklahoma. And also, if you'll tell the staff there, hey, Scott Townsend said to give me a large spicy pig, they'll give you a free large spicy sausage wrap. But you have to tell them Scott Townsend sent you. So tell them, hey, Scott Townsend told me to tell you to give me a large spicy pig. So there's the offer. There's the call to action. So go to Pop's Daylight Donuts. Say hi to Mark for me. And go to Pop's Daylight Donuts and get you some. If you've enjoyed this podcast in 2021, you have my patrons to thank for that. A bunch of Wildcats got together and created a GoFundMe account to help in the production of this podcast. With that in mind, I've started a Patreon page so that listeners can help support the last of the Call High Wildcats 1982 podcast on a month-to-month basis. There are different levels of membership, so please check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/Wildcats1982. And now back to the show. All right, I'm back with Kurt Rovenstein, last of the Call High Wildcats 1982 podcast. And so I saw where in the yearbook, you and John Lacey were in the Milstead, what was that, Milstead Van Lines ad for?
What's that about, huh? So I look at that picture and I think I should have listened to Tony Brock. He caught me in the hallway one day. I was walking to a class. He was walking the other way. He made a sarcastic comment about my beard. And I thought, he doesn't know what he's talking about. This beard is awesome. I looked at that picture and I thought, you know what? He was right. That thing should have come off before that picture.
You mentioned this earlier, but who were some of your friends that you hung out with in high school? You mentioned Mueller's and the OWU crowd.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
First Wesleyan crowd. Yeah. I worked a lot. So when school was over, once I stopped playing basketball for, I think it was just the 1 year, I wasn't involved in many of the extracurriculars around school. So I went to work. My cousin Les and I hung out. Les and Jeff, they were twins that lived there for a couple of years. In fact, Les is my cousin. They just passed this past week from COVID, but we'd go, to work and hang out on the roof. For my uncle Joe.
Yeah.
So
Joe Rovenstein.
Joe Rovenstein. Yeah.
Mr. Progressive.
Yeah. Our insurance guy. Shelter.
Yeah. Sorry, Joe.
If I didn't correct that, I'd have been in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So my work friends were people that probably hung out with more than.
So you worked on the roofing? A roofing crew?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I was doing fall?
4 times.
4 times.
Yeah. Yeah. But never. I mean, I every time I was able to go back, get back up on the roof and get after it. So,
Wow.
When you're up high and in a dangerous position, you're careful because this is dangerous. When you're 7 foot off the ground, you do stuff you fall and you go, that was dumb. I shouldn't have done that. But so yeah, 4 different times I fell. One time could have been hurt pretty bad, but the other times it's just stupidity, and everybody looked at it and said, that was dumb. Why'd you do that? So I did have my brother Mickey, you were talking about him. He worked with us for a little bit. My Uncle Joe was the kind of guy that if it was wet or cold, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
It was a day that it had snowed a couple of days before, and the sun had melted the south side, but the north sides of the houses still had a little snow on them.
Mm-hmm.
So we were up there working and on the front side. But as we got up, there was a little spot of ice, and my brother stepped up onto the roof, and his hammer fell out of his pouch and fell right beside me. I was just getting ready to go up the ladder after him, and he yelled down. He said, "Hey, Kurt, can you get my hammer for me?" And right at that time, he slid on that ice and fell down. His tailbone hit the roof, and then he bounced off and landed right beside me. And he just looked over at me, just as quick as could be. I said, "Never mind, I'll get it." So, and then we go up on the roof, and we're pushing snow off the back, and 2 or 3 guys start to slide down and say, "Joe, this is stupid. We shouldn't be here. Why are we doing this?" And then he slides almost to the bottom. He says, "Yeah, it's time to go."
Don't push it. You still stay in touch with any of your high school friends? I know you haven't stayed in touch with me, so we must not have been that good of friends. But.
Not as good as I should. One of the things you said we might talk about is regrets. When you're in high school, you connect with people conditionally because you're insecure in who you are. If I could go back and just be a little more myself, and whether they like me or don't like me, this is who I am.
Right.
I regret some of that, not being able to connect with people because I felt like they had standards that I couldn't keep, and and then you find out later after having conversations with them, they were thinking the exact same thing you were. So
yeah, that's one of the biggies from this project is I'm finding pretty much everybody was in the same boat. We all tried to act like we weren't. Yeah,
just be yourself and value what you bring to the table as far as contribution to conversation or activity or whatever the case may be. But working with kids, I was in youth ministry for a lot of years. It's still the same way. Kids it takes a while for you to figure out who you are and how you're going to interact with people and live life. I just wish we could learn that earlier.
I know if you went up to a high school student and said, "Hey, let me just tell you right now, don't worry about what other people think. Just go over there, talk to that girl if you want to talk to her. Go over there and talk to that guy if you want to go talk to him. Y'all just be friends or whatever." It's just so much harder than that. We make it so much harder. So
yeah, it's easy to say. It's hard to do.
Yeah. Have you been up to any of the reunions?
Yeah, I've been to 2 of them, and I'm not sure. I think there was one I wasn't. Have we had 3? I think maybe we did 10,
20, and 30, 40 coming up next year.
Yeah, so I missed one. I think the one in between. I was at 10 and 30. Pretty sure that's what I had. So
do you plan on going to the 40?
I hope to. With this ministry with Bibles for China, we've not been able to be in China since COVID started. And if things open up, I hope to be able to go to China 2 or 3 times this coming year. And that would be one of the few things I think that would keep me from doing that. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Right.
And like you say, Scott, it's fun to sit down and talk with guys and gals that you went to school with and find out where they've been. And like you said, what they thought of high school and the folks you thought had it all together.
Mm-hmm.
just as insecure, and they reeled in their confidence just as much as you did in your or their perceived confidence as you did
Right.
in your incompetence. So but yeah, I enjoy that a lot. Yeah.
What's been your greatest accomplishment in the last 39 years?
I'm
sure you've had many. I'm sure you've had many.
I'm just going through my journal before we started and tried to, I don't have a journal. That's
You were about to impress me there for a second. I was like, oh wow, he does a journal.
I think my my kids, my wife and I talk about that a lot. We just had our girls were pretty incredible, and still are pretty incredible people, and to watch them grow up and make good decisions about life and find husbands that are quality men and just live lives of integrity. They love the Lord, and they have just done well. That's satisfying, because I don't care what you say your greatest accomplishment is. Somebody's always done something better. You start. It's the same game. I think maybe just learning to be who I am and being comfortable in my own skin and teaching my kids to be that way as well. I think.
Yeah, that's cool.
Significant. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that is probably been my greatest accomplishment, is my wife and kids, and investing in them as best I can. So.
I know it. We have one.
Yeah.
And so what do you want for Father's Day? What do you want for Christmas? Blah blah blah. And that we were able to keep you alive until you were 18, and you've turned out really well, and you've exceeded all of our expectations, and you have a beautiful wife, and you got a great kid now. I don't need anything, man. Just I've said that before. I just just that alone, I can live on that for the rest of my life.
Yeah, pretty good stuff. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good stuff. Yeah, and that's about perspective. And again, if you're just happy with what you have and where you're at in life, that goes a long way in helping you be successful in whatever you're doing, because you're not grasping at things that are in the long term inconsequential. You do
right.
So. Yeah.
I think success, the definition of success is whatever you define it as. So, for example, you want to get married, you want to have kids, healthy grandkids, and one, there's a few goals, a good job and all this stuff. And there's several goals that, we all have in life. And, once you attain, and Kent Hudson was kind of talking about this in his, and Sandra Yeager, talking about, always moving the goalpost, always you swing to one brass ring and then you go for the other brass ring. And, you're kind of like George of the Jungle, going through the jungle. At some point, you have to be okay with what you've got, and, just be content. That's not to say that you don't want to try to do more, maybe, but for the most part, be okay with what the success you've had up to this point, which is huge.
Yeah.
So
one of my favorite lines in a movie is from Cool Runnings. I don't know if you've ever watched that movie.
Mm-hmm. Long time ago.
Bobsled team from Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a young man who wants to get a gold medal, because he wasn't able to make the Olympic team as a runner. He's now doing it with a bobsled. And he had a coach that was coaching him that cheated to win. And this young man asked why he cheated, to win. And in the course of that conversation, he said he wanted to get the gold. He had to get the gold medal, but he came to the realization that if you're not enough without the gold medal, you're never going to be enough with the gold medal. And I think that to me, I love that concept, because if you're not okay, short of your goals, or your achievements, you're not going to be okay with them.
Mhm.
And so it's just that, going back to those, if we could get in the mind of those high school kids right now and just say, hey, you're okay, just being you. You don't
Right.
have, you don't have to do the stupid stuff everyone else is doing. You don't have to try to meet their standard. You want to be the best you can. There's nothing
Right.
wrong.
Mhm.
God gave you gifts, and you need to use them. You need to, develop them. But if you're not okay, before you achieve, you're not going to be okay after. So I think that's probably, and I guess that's probably a lifelong process for all of us.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, you kind of answered my last question, or one of my last questions is, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self? It sounds like there's something in there in the last 5 minutes that
Yeah, probably. Besides shaving that beard, or not even giving that a shot, that would be one. But yeah, just be okay who you are, and not worry about what other people think, because they're a lot like you.
Mm-hmm.
Same boat.
Yeah.
So
what's this 2022 going to be like? What are you looking forward to? What if you could look into the crystal ball?
I hope that we return to normalcy. And I don't know what that is, but my wife and I were just talking about that. Just this, I think it was yesterday. Have things fundamentally shifted? Or are we still just in an anomalaic kind of existence? So, because there's things you just keep putting off because of politics, COVID, the turmoil in the world. And do we bounce back, or do we have to learn to live in the world we are? So, as we talked earlier about, and I don't know if this was on the air or off the air, but, people coming to church or staying home, is that the new normal, or are they going to want to be in fellowship and, sitting in a chair or a pew? And so
Right.
I just love to go back to some level of what, what everybody would consider normal. So
Yeah. Probably depends on how good the pastor is,
Yeah, that's true. Thanks. Well, that's probably, I tell people.
I'm sure. I'm just kidding.
So, but that's, one of the things I have in a small community like this is when people ask what size my church is, I said, well, I have about 10% of my entire city coming to church. So Bartlesville, that'd be a whopper, right?
That'd be a whopper. Yeah. That'd be a mega church.
So,
but anyway, yeah, I mean, that's great.
Hey, you know what? Hey, Scott, I'm happy just being myself with.
There you go.
It's where God wants me. It's what I'm doing. I did the best I can. If it's not good enough for some, I just have to be the best I can, and that's okay.
Tell them to go suck eggs.
Oh, I've said that a lot.
All right, man. Well, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Email probably krovenstein@gmail.com. Be a
All
great
right.
way to do it. Yeah, probably the easiest is I'm on Facebook. Instant message me. I think that's one where you don't have to really remember an address. I guess you just go and find
Right.
one, do the instant message. So
What final words to all the Wildcats out there listening? What do you want to tell them?
Yeah, look forward to seeing you if you're at the 40th, and keep on being the last of the Wildcats. That was really that was an honor to be able to be a part of that last class. So it was really cool.
Yeah.
Scott, thanks.
All right, man.
Appreciate you giving me a chance to come and share a little bit.
Yeah.
Hear about your life some too.
All right. Well, for Kurt Rovenstein, this is Scott Townsend. Thanks for watching, listening, the last of the Call High Wildcats 1982 podcast. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.
Last of the Call High Wildcats 1982 podcast is a Dietzo Man production. For more episodes, visit the Last of the Call High Wildcats 1982 YouTube channel, listen on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.